Hello everyone, and welcome to the Daily Signal's Top 10. And today we're counting down the top news stories of the week, many of which have gone either misreported or underreported in the mainstream media. I'm Jenny Maltabano, and here with me to break all of this down is my colleague at the Daily Signal, Jarrett Stepman. He's also the co-host of the podcast, Right Side of History. Jarrett, thanks for being with me.
Thank you so much.
Now, speaking of history, America had a big day yesterday. It was Thomas Jefferson's 275th birthday. And you have a lot to say about this.
Well, I love Thomas Jefferson, and unfortunately, I blew it today. I have Thomas Jefferson socks, but I forgot to wear them. I have Abraham Lincoln socks on instead, which is okay because Lincoln mentioned Thomas Jefferson. The Gettysburg Address was kind of a reference to Jefferson, so
it'll do.
I love that.
All right, well, happy birthday, Thomas. All right, first up, James Comey is going on tour. It's a book tour, and his first stop was ABC's George Stephanopoulos. Watch this.
President-elect Trump's first question was to confirm that it had no impact on the election. And then the conversation, to my surprise, moved into a PR conversation about how the Trump team would position this and what they could say about this. They actually started talking about drafting a press release with us still sitting there. And the reason that was so striking to me is that that's just not done. That the intelligence community does intelligence, the White House does PR and spin.
You also said you were struck by what they didn't ask.
Very much. No one, to my recollection, asked, so what's coming next from the Russians? How might we stop it? What's the future look like? It was all, what can we say about what they did and how it affects the election that we just had.
All right, so you just saw James Comey with George Stephanopoulos. It's his first interview in a series that will take place. Jared, a little ironic that it's with George Stephanopoulos. What do you think about that?
It really is. It's, of course, Clinton's former press secretary and all this. So it is kind of funny seeing Comey do this. And, you know, Comey's going to go on this big book tour. And I've had a chance to read at least a few of the lines from this book. I haven't read it, obviously, cover to cover yet. But it is interesting that, I mean, Comey, of course, is kind of portraying himself as this hero in this battle. But look, there's a lot in this book that seems like a lot of personal sniping at President Donald Trump. And it's kind of a narrative of him fighting the man, and so to speak. So, I mean, certainly I think there are going to be a lot of people, especially on the left, who are going to respond very positively to this. But I think there are a lot of people that kind of doubt some of his claims to be, you know, this kind of a champion for what is truth and what is right and justice.
You say sniping, and President Trump has not gone easy on him. I think he's calling him a slime ball on Twitter right now. So this is getting interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on this. Now on to number 9, Sarah Huckabee Sanders addressed the Syria crisis that's going on. She said all options are on the table. Here she is.
I don't have any announcements. Hallie.
Sarah, 2 on Syria. Given your comments, given here at the podium, given the President's speech this morning, is the White House prepared for the possibility of direct military engagement with Russia?
Once again, all options are on the table, and I don't have any further announcements about.
Like a yes, I want to be clear.
It sounds like all options are on the table, and a final decision hasn't been made, but we'll keep you posted once it is.
Once again, she's doing a great job with these questions. President Trump had kind of gotten some criticism for maybe being a little too open about Syria on Twitter. So she and him this week have done a great job of kind of taking a step back, being a little vague. What do you think about their strategy?
Yeah, I mean, you know, look, I mean, I think there was some pushing from reporters to say, well, is every option on the table when it comes to Syria? And she said, all options are on the table, which I think is from a foreign policy perspective, that's the wise choice to have. You don't want to say, well, no, these options are off the table. You don't want to telegraph to your potential enemy that some things may not be on the table. To keep things open keeps enemies guessing, and it says, hey, look, the United States, we're going to protect U.S. interests and our foreign policy goals. That means all options are on the table.
And President Trump really made an emphasis on not telegraphing during the campaign. It was more in relation to ISIS, which he's been very successful with. So I think this is clearly the right move.
Yeah, and you know what? There's so much criticism of Trump not taking action on the Syria issue. And now that it seems like he may start taking some action, well, you shouldn't be so open about it. So sometimes a lot of the criticism on this just seems to be, we don't like President Donald Trump. We don't like his policies, no matter what they are. So you're gonna throw stones at that. So it's good to see that the options are open, and it sounds like they haven't necessarily made a decision, but hopefully something good comes out of it.
And hopefully everybody has the same goal, which is America's safety. So we'll see what happens. Now on to number 8. Senator Ted Cruz from Texas grilled Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg on Capitol Hill this week about silencing conservatives. Watch this.
Well, Mr. Zuckerberg, I will say there are a great many Americans who I think are deeply concerned that Facebook and other tech companies are engaged in a pervasive pattern of bias and political censorship. There have been numerous instances with Facebook. In May of 2016, Gizmodo reported that Facebook had purposely and routinely suppressed conservative stories from trending news, including stories about CPAC, including stories about Mitt Romney, including stories about the Lois Lerner IRS scandal, including stories about Glenn Beck. In addition to that, Facebook has initially shut down the Chick-fil-A Appreciation Day page, has blocked a post of a Fox News reporter, has blocked over 24 Catholic pages, and most recently blocked Trump supporters Diamond and Silk's page with 1.2 million Facebook followers after determining their content and brand were, quote, unsafe to the community. To a great many Americans, that appears to be a pervasive pattern of political bias. Do you agree with that assessment?
Senator, let me say a few things about this. First, I understand where that concern is coming from because Facebook and the tech industry are located in Silicon Valley, which is an extremely left-leaning place. And this is actually a concern that I have and that I try to root out at the company, is making sure that we don't have any bias in the work that we do. And I think it is a fair concern that that people would at least wonder about.
Let me ask this question. Are you aware of any ad or page that has been taken down from Planned Parenthood?
Senator, I'm not, but let me just...
How about MoveOn.org?
Sorry?
How about MoveOn.org?
I'm not specifically aware of those.
How about
cases.
any Democratic candidate for office?
I'm not specifically aware. I mean, I'm not sure.
So there you saw Senator Cruz talking to Mark Zuckerberg about silencing conservatives on Facebook. Jared, I know a lot of conservatives really appreciated Senator Cruz bringing this up. What did you think about Zuckerberg's answer, and what do you think Facebook needs to do to correct this?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, I think it was a bit of a non-answer from Zuckerberg. And I am so glad to see Senator Cruz bring this up. I mean, there were a lot of other questions asked at this hearing about data and things like this, but this is something that's really on the minds, especially of a lot of conservatives in this country who feel that a lot of these big Silicon Valley websites that purport to be neutral platforms like Twitter, like Facebook, like YouTube, are not exactly neutral platforms. And Cruz brought up an important point that these websites, they get legal protections to have this business model because they say that they're neutral. If they're actually censoring content or saying that we're going to start to take some down because of their political views, they could run afoul of some of the laws. So these are very important questions that I'm so glad that Senator Ted Cruz actually pushed at this thing, because not a lot of other people were asking this.
Yeah. You know, to me, a world where Diamond and Silk are deemed unsafe for the community, I have to question what is going on, and what do you all think is going on? Let us know. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Senator Sass also had a really good exchange with Mark Zuckerberg that we would encourage you to check out. Now on to number 7. This is just mind-blowing. 2/3 of millennials don't know what Auschwitz was, which is kind of hard to imagine. Jared, how do we fix this, and how did we get to this point?
Well, I mean, this is really, this is a letdown of the American people, the young people in this country who have not learned about this. Of course, this week was Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's something that, we all tell ourselves we should never forget. And here's a case where we have a generation of young people, and it's not just Auschwitz and, of course, the death camp that the Nazis had in Poland. It's other things, too. I mean, we had a poll that came out last year that said that most millennials thought that, or about a third of millennials thought that George W. Bush had killed more people than Stalin, that they liked communism better than capitalism. So you have a lot of absurd ideas and a lot of ignorance of history. And I think this really is a failure of our public schools in this country. And I think that it shows that, hey, look, we talk about these things like school choice. We talk about other viable options for young Americans. We've gotten to a crisis where we just don't know our past, even our immediate past. This is 20th century. This is some of the most dramatic moments of the 20th century. It's pretty inexcusable that young people don't know about it.
Yeah, and we don't just see it with Auschwitz. It's a whole range of issues, and like you said, it goes back to the school system. So definitely need to keep an eye on that and take a hard look. On to number 6. This is a great story. Alabama players were at the White House this week. Some of them stood around President Trump and asked if they could say a prayer together. You can see it on the screen behind us. This was great. This was really nice to see. I think we could see more of it.
Yeah, I think so too. And of course, with a lot of these sports teams lately, especially the Golden State Warriors, which I'm a fan of. I'm from Oakland, California. have not gone to the White House, and there has been more acrimony with these teams and President Trump. And I'm glad that the Alabama football team went to the White House. They got the respect and recognition that they deserve as the national champions. And they also made this moment that, look, we're going to respect the president, we're going to respect the office, we're going to come to D.C. and have this moment, and then have a prayer on a national stage, which I think is just a great thing.
With the president?
With the president at this thing. So I do think that's a great thing, and I'm glad to see this.
Yeah, I think it sent a really good message during a time when traditional values are constantly being attacked. This was awesome to see. All right, on to number 5. You've probably seen this. A college student, she posed with her gun for her graduation photo, and boy, did Twitter get fired up. Watch this.
Second Amendment has been under attack, especially on college campuses. So not only do they try to restrict our right to carry on campus, but they also are trying to up the age to 21 to buy a gun. So I think it's really important to empower people to show that you should be allowed to protect yourself. Your rights don't stop at a college campus.
Jared, we were talking about this before we started filming, and the media really hyped this up. I mean, yes, there were some people angry on Twitter, and now it's escalated, but the media played a huge role. ABC News actually called the police on Brenna, trying to get her in trouble. She was in the right. She could carry this gun where she was, and she's been very fiery about that. She talked to our great Daily Signal intern, Chrissy Clark, and said, you know, carrying for me is empowering for women, and I really agreed with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think this is a lot of the media trying to say that there's some kind of outrage at this young girl for doing something that I think is a pretty normal thing. I mean, she says, oh, this is, a wild thing. But, look, she had these, high school photos that she was graduating and stuff like that. I think the media kind of cooked up and said, hey, there's some kind of negative reaction to this. I mean, maybe there are some Americans on Twitter, and of course there are all kinds of crazy things on Twitter. But I think a lot of Americans appreciate this kind of thing and don't have really a problem with what she's doing.
Right. My favorite part of this is that a couple weeks later, her best friend did the same pose. And Twitter, people in favor of the Second Amendment just erupted and thought it was wonderful. And that's not all that's going on with Second Amendment in schools. You just had a piece come out this week on Parkland. Can you give us a little sneak preview of what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a young student in the Broward County area Kenneth Preston, who's been an investigative journalist. He's actually looked in to the school discipline policies at the Parkland school and found the fact that the school system had been sitting on $100 million that they hadn't spent on school safety, and that there were some discipline policies there that were in alignment with Obama-era discipline policies to end the school-to-prison pipeline that could have opened up the cracks for the shooting to take place. So here's an actual student journalist who unfortunately got harassed at a recent meeting. He basically wasn't allowed to speak by the administration. So here we have a young kid actually going out and doing what the CNNs of the world have failed to do, which is start to ask questions about how the school actually, how they dealt with this obviously violent and dangerous person on their campus. So there are some young people in this country who are doing good work. Unfortunately, their stories aren't told as often in the media because they don't fit certain narratives. But it's definitely a good thing to see.
And that's a great piece that you did. And also, our editor-in-chief Rob Bluey spoke with President Obama's first education secretary this week. That's up on Daily Signal, and he spoke a lot about the Obama-era policies that he helped to enact. All right, speaking of young people, number 4, there was a pro-life walkout. It got, naturally, very little coverage by the media, and here's what one man who participated in California thinks about it.
Support Brandon. We support the idea of freedom of speech, and fairness, and we feel that all views should be heard, not just one side. And, of course, we're here to support life.
So this is kind of incredible, right? It's a pro-life walkout. Are you surprised? It took place in California. You're a California expert being there. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, of course, again, look at the response to this compared to the March for Our Lives walkout protest. And I can't say it surprises me. I mean, the difference between the coverage of that event and, say, the March for Life that happens in Washington, D.C. every year is so dramatically different that we've seen from the media. And, of course, a lot of these students didn't quite get the first-class treatment from their schools that a lot of the kids in the March for Life or March for Our Lives protest got in the student walkout. So it doesn't surprise me at all to see that they got different treatment. But, good on these students for, taking a stand on this issue that the media really doesn't want to pay attention to.
And pro-life walkouts aren't the only ones we've seen. We've seen several pro-Second Amendment walkouts, so it definitely seems like people are feeling more empowered and expressing themselves, so we'll keep an eye on it. All right, number 3, the London mayor is now banning knives. Okay, there's been a lot of ridiculous things that have happened this week. This seems like it should almost take the cake. should he ban knives?
Well, I mean, it almost gets to the point of satire. I kind of wondered when I first saw this, is this actually Babylon Bee or The Onion, which are joke satire websites? Can this actually be real? But it is real. This is the London mayor who, of course, this escalating knife attacks in the city, has decided the idea to stop these is to simply disarm anybody from even having a knife. Of course, London already has very, very strict gun control laws, which, look, it just goes to show that look, we live in a fallen world. They're dangerous, bad people. They can use whatever implement, whatever tool they can to hurt others. Why would you take away the few remaining weapons that may be at the disposal of decent people to actually protect themselves?
And, you know, people don't just carry knives for self-defense. Like, I'm from Texas. It seems like everybody carries one just for run-of-the-mill, everyday things, and they come in handy. But also, self-defense is critical, so this does seem a bit ludicrous.
Well, and there are also some crazy things. They've actually showed, there's some of the local police departments have shown them taking away garden tools from people. So how far does this actually go? A knife is a fairly common household item. Are we going to go into every house and take away all the knives and all the forks and all the other things that are sharp and pointy? I mean, it's just it's absurd.
Yeah, this is a very slippery slope. All right, number 2, very, very powerful words coming from Jim Jordan on a balanced budget amendment. Watch this clip.
Mr. Speaker, everyone knows this is a joke. It's all pretend. Never going to become law, never going to happen. People are going to support it because voting for a balanced budget amendment's like voting for motherhood and apple pie. But everybody on this floor knows this is all pretend. The time to deal with spending was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, that was the time for political courage, some discipline, some political will was 3 weeks ago when we got a 2,232-page bill that we had 15 hours to look at. That was when we needed to deal with spending. 15 hours to look at a $1.3 trillion spending package, the second largest spending package in American history, and we had 15 hours to look at it. Oh, and guess what? You know how long we got to debate it? 1 hour. On a 3-page bill that's never going to happen. You know how long we're debating this? 4 hours.
Okay, Jared, I don't know about you, but I think this will go down as an extremely important and pivotal speech that he gave, especially when he spoke about everyone's so focused on who's going to be the next speaker, right? Because that's the easy thing to talk about. What's not so easy, perhaps, is why they were voted into office.
Absolutely. I just love the fact that he went after the fact that, look, just a week ago we had these people that were voting on essentially this huge, huge spending bill, and now we have this balanced budget amendment that they've been pushing for decades. I mean, decades, from before I was born, that always seems to just barely not pass. I mean, how ridiculous is it that, you know, we put these people in office, they say that, well, we're going to really cut spending, we're really going to cut these things back. They spend all this money saying, well, we'll try to some method to stop this, and then it never passes.
Right.
It fails by a couple votes. And I admire the fact that he called out the hypocrisy on this issue, because it gets aggravating seeing this year after year after year, and the voters are tired of it.
Right, and something about this speech to me just struck a different tone. You know, he clearly says, we were given a mandate the last election, clearly with President Trump's election. So what are they doing? Instead of all this palace intrigue, why not come to some solutions, even if they're not incredibly popular at first? There's real work that needs to be done.
Absolutely. And as he said, you know, look, almost all these legislators say, well, we want a balanced budget, we want this, but their actions show that that's not really the case, that they're happy to spend more and more money. They're happy to do things that they didn't promise when they got into office. They keep the money flowing, and it's a terrible thing for the country. It's why we're in such a bad fiscal shape right now.
And we'd love to hear from you what you thought about what the congressman said. A lot of people really have had great things to say and good reception. All right, number 1, probably the hottest news story this week. Speaker Paul Ryan will not be seeking re-election. Here's what he had to say.
Morning. I wanted to share with you a little of what I just told my colleagues a few minutes ago. You realize something when you take this job. It's a big job with a lot riding on you, and you feel it. But you also know that this is a job that does not last forever. You realize that you hold the office for just a small part of our history, so you better make the most of it. It's fleeting. And that inspires you to do big things. And on that score, I think we have achieved a heck of a lot. You all know that I did not seek this job. I took it reluctantly, but I have given this job everything that I have. And I have no regrets whatsoever for having accepted this responsibility. This has been one of the 2 greatest honors of my life.
So within D.C., this wasn't necessarily a shock. A lot of people had been wondering. It does seem like the right time for him. There seems like a lot of reasons for his timing. Obviously, his kids are older. His own dad passed away, I think, when he was 16. His kids are right at that age. So I think there's a lot more thinking that went into this than a lot of people might speculate. What was your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, Paul Ryan has been one of the more consequential Republicans, certainly of the last 5 or 6 years in Washington, D.C. And look, he's been pushing this narrative for a long time. He's been one of the few politicians to go out there and say, we need to do something about entitlements. We need to reform this. This is not sustainable for the long term. And that's been always a very bitter pill for voters to swallow. And look, he hasn't fully gotten that done. I think that's something that still remains in the future. But, you know, I think he still does have a bright future in politics. I mean, we'll see what his next step is. There are a lot of people say that he maybe want to join a think tank or to get into more of the policy side. But look, we'll see. I mean, he's been a very busy man over the last 5 years, and I'm sure his political career has not ended at this, and he's certainly been very consequential.
Yeah, it does seem like now that he's leaving when he is, a comeback is certainly possible. He's so young. Do you think we'll see him back?
I think we will. I think we'll see him back in more of a policy capacity. He certainly has very strong convictions about the ideas that he's tried to bring to D.C., not always successfully. There's been a lot of resistance, and a lot of his policies aren't always popular with other members of Congress, but he's a very strong voice for, honestly, fiscal sanity in this country, and we need that in Washington. We really do.
Yeah, and some people say he certainly is happiest when it comes to policy. You know, being the chairman of Ways and Means was his dream. Passing tax reform was his dream. He did that. He did not want to be speaker, but like he said in his talk, in his speech, he gave it everything he had. He went into detail about this on Dana Perino's show this week, and he had some great answers also about how his relationship with President Trump evolved, which I found to be really interesting.
Absolutely, and that has been a very complicated thing. I mean, he was not necessarily a big Trump supporter early on, and you know, he's found ways to work with the president. Of course, we've had this kind of signature tax cut that's been a big deal. I'm sure that's something that both Ryan and President Trump both are happy about. So there have been things accomplished, you know, but we'll see what the next stage is. We'll see what happens in the next 4 years. Of course, you know, the Congress could change and there could definitely be new leadership. So we'll see how the ideas coming out of leadership will change too.
Yeah. Now Mitt Romney's coming back in November. It feels like 2012. I don't know. All right, well, it was great being with you all this week. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here next week, same time, same place. Thank you.